posted before the meeting. This will be a special meeting for the sole purpose of conducting an RDC Commissioner Training Workshop concerning the Commissioner's statutory role, responsibilities, and powers and RDC best practices, with a presentation at 10 a.m. from Rhonda Cook, Deputy Director and Chief Federal and State Policy Officer of Accelerated Indiana Municipalities, or AIM, formerly the Association of Cities and Towns. While the public is welcome to attend this meeting, there will be no opportunity for public participation or questions at this RDC training workshop. If you do have any questions while observing this meeting, please reach out to any and all of the RDC Commission members, and we will be happy to answer what questions we can. With that, we'll begin with a presentation from the RDC attorney, Bob Rund. Bob,
yeah,
floor is yours.
It won't be so much of a presentation as a interactive dialogue on statute requirements and those things. I've passed out materials that you can look at. If you can pull out, there's a just a second, let me pull out here.
Powers and authority?
Clip document that says powers and authority of an RDC. And to the extent that you like reading code, you know, these are just excerpts. The redevelopment code is quite a bit more than this, but these are sort of selected provisions. And I would call, if you go to the page after the title page, on powers of commission 36.7.14.12.2, this is what's most often cited as what a RDC can do, and it's kind of like a general powers. You can see that, you know, you can acquire by purchase, exchange, gift, grant, condemnation, or lease, or any combination of methods, any personal property, any interest in real property needed for the redevelopment of areas needing redevelopment that are located within the corporate boundaries of the unit. And a unit in the statute means the city. Hold, use, sell, by deed, land sale contract, or other instruments, exchange, lease, rent, or otherwise dispose of property acquired for use in the redevelopment of areas needing redevelopment on the terms and conditions that the Commission considers best for the unit and its inhabitants. Sell, lease, or grant interest in all or part of the real estate acquired for redevelopment purposes to any other department of the unit, and so a department of the unit might be the Parks Department, for example, or to any other governmental agency for public ways, levees, sewerage, parks, playgrounds, schools, and other public purposes on any terms that may be agreed on. You can clear real property. You can, you know, do inspections for hazardous substances and petroleum and other pollutants. You can remediate environmental contamination, and that's what we did at Beech Grove Station. Some of that was done on the property that was a dump that this previous administration had hoped could be used for a park of purpose of some sort or sports purpose. That's just an example. I won't get into it because this is just to talk about your authority, your responsibilities, and possibilities. You can repair and maintain structures for redevelopment purposes. Now, this is interesting because it says maintain, but it's for redevelopment purposes. Once it's redeveloped, you know, you acquire it, you redevelop it, you can maintain it until you dispose of it. But once title goes to, like, the unit, the city, or goes to the Parks Department or some third party, let's say you redevelop something for business, you can't maintain it after that point in time. In the case that I've talked about, for those of you who have been on the commission for a while, once you no longer have that interest in the property title-wise, the City of Munster case, which was an Indiana Court of Appeals decision, said that you cannot spend money to keep maintaining a property after it's been conveyed. And there it was conveyed to their Parks Department. And there was an audit exception by the State Board of Accounts. They said, well, you shouldn't be doing this, you know, a slap on the hands, and those are put online publicly so other people could read them. And the City of Munster, or it's actually called the Town of Munster, didn't like that, so they wanted to continue doing what they were doing in the future. So they filed what's called a declaratory judgment action, which says, Judge, we have a controversy here. We think the law is this. State Board of Accounts thinks the law is that. We want to know how to proceed in the future, and here's why we think we can maintain the parks on an ongoing basis. Board of Appeals sided with State Board of Accounts, not with the RDC Commission or the town of Munster in that case. Cases created a lot of problems for a lot of RDCs in trying to know what the line is. And they didn't define
What specifically were they doing? Do you remember?
the case doesn't say. You know, I don't know whether it was.
Manchester Park.
Yeah,
I'm assuming this
it's
is the case you
park.
gave us.
It's park.
Yeah.
But what were they doing in the park? Were they maintaining shrubs? Were they maintaining buildings? It doesn't say. It's strange. I should have called the lawyer for the town of Munster and just asked him, or tried to get a hold of. The trial court decisions where they go more into the facts aren't published. It's only when you get to the Court of Appeals or higher that you can find a publication that actually has the written decision. And the written decision is kind of fact thin. So I don't really know what they were specifically doing, but it was the Parks Department.
So lesson learned, have a good attorney, and the State Board of Accounts is probably going to win on any of these.
Well, you know, they don't always win on them, and State Board of Accounts is usually an agency that if you ask, you usually get the answer no.
Okay.
And sometimes there's a saying among lawyers that represent municipalities and schools, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Oh, okay. Okay, I've heard that.
But that depends on the type of issue, you know, but remodel, build, obviously you can survey, determine needs for redevelopment. You can,
Well, we had a State Board of Accounts, what was it, 2 years ago, issue. I mean, we were paying to have these videotaped.
oh,
And
and that wasn't an audit, that was.
right, but I mean,
That was
we
an
went to them and we asked them.
Let's not get into specifics.
Right,
Yeah.
but I mean, yeah, so it's,
Yeah.
it's with the State Board of Accounts. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been working here
And they
for
are not
15 years.
lawyers, they are accountants.
Right.
Yes.
Primarily, so.
Oh, I know them quite well.
Yeah.
If you ever do a recount at the state level, they're the ones who actually recount ballots.
And they do have a small in-house legal staff, but primarily they rely on the Attorney General's office.
Okay.
Okay. I do have a question while we're on this page. So
Yeah, please ask questions.
So, in 36.714.12.2A that you have just gone over, at least on the first page, a lot of the provisions that the commission seems to have, or what the legislature put up first, was acquiring property. Now, I've only been on the board since this year, and we do a lot of while working with the city of doing a lot of other reconstruction, but we haven't acquired any property, at least this year. I have a twofold question. One, for the last 10 years, at least since 2012, when you were brought on as attorney for the board, how many times has the commission acquired any property or any parcel for redevelopment purposes in that time, so in the last 10 years? And then since this redevelopment commission's been around, have we ever done that?
To the first question, the answer is 0. To the second question, a few times. We acquired the property for Beech Grove Station. That happened somewhat before I came on. I worked on it to get it to the goal line. We were still dealing with some contaminant issues and some other issues to get that, and we won't get into specifics. Kathy knows more of the further back history than I do, probably, but
when I came on board, they had already acquired the property. They were trying to get rid of the property. Then when they had the opportunity for Beech Grove Station, then we started working.
That worked out well. I mean, that's
yeah, that
beautiful.
To me, that's the best thing that the commission has done in the.
I think so too. I have a question on page 1. Off and on through the years, even before this group, we had talked about buying a house in a blighted area, refurbishing it, and then selling it. It appears that we can do that. The question of reselling it is the RDC allowed to make a profit on it?
Huh.
Good question.
Or do we have to sell it for exactly what we invested in it, which still isn't a bad deal?
When you sell property, and there are provisions on selling property, you cannot sell it for less than what 2 appraisers put a price on it. So
Okay.
if you want to call making more than that number a profit, are merely revenues that you put back into the commission's work. It's the way I would look at it, rather than.
Well, prior to this commission, we had talked, that came up in conversation because there's so many houses, maybe not as many now, but there were like 250 foreclosures a while back.
Right.
I think in 2008
Right
and
after.
onward. And
There's
we
not
talked
much
about
out
that.
there at all right now.
I'm sorry?
So there's not much out there at all on Beech
Oh,
Grove
I
right
know,
now.
I know. I mean, we kind of missed that mark. But it's come up every year as a way of taking a house, making it look nice, putting a sign out front, remodeled by the RDC, selling it, taking that money, slowly but surely taking some of these blighted areas and trying to.
Well, there's some relatively new programs that have been passed in the last year or two that I think gives us a little more ability to deal with single-family and small units than we had. Before, we were not, we were more restricted, and we'll at least look at a couple provisions that might address some of that.
Yeah, well, I agree there's not as many, but every day when Ed and I are driving around, we find at least one vacant foreclosed house every day.
Really?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Some of them have surprised us because, one day we're going by there and there's a family living there, and next, a few weeks later we go by, it's vacant, it's empty.
Because they were
So, but
Well,
that
in the
doesn't mean
process.
it's still a good deal money-wise. And it's not necessarily in a blighted area.
Yeah, and I know even to buy one to fix up is getting,
Oh, there's
You're-
one just
you're-
a few
you're
doors
getting-
from me, and I'm shocked. I am absolutely shocked at the sale price on that house.
yeah, they're starting to get close. Even the fixer-uppers are starting to get close to
Exactly, and
100,000
I know
to
the
buy.
company. I think I mentioned it the other night. I refer to this property management company as the slumlords of Beech Grove.
Well, let's continue, yeah.
Yeah, let's, you'll see some authorities that you might find surprising, since Beech Grove RDC has no employees directly, other than indirectly through Jim, who serves as your clerk treasurer by statute. is appoint clerks, guards, laborers, and other employees the commission considers advisable, except that those appointments must be made in accordance with the merit system, if such a system exists. I don't know what that means, but pension and retirement system for employees of the Department of Redevelopment. Obviously, this is for large commissions like Carmel and
I'm assuming Indianapolis uses the same
Indianapolis.
statute for their metropolitan
Yeah.
commission, yeah.
so. The city of Indianapolis, as a first-class city, has some additional statutes that don't apply to
Okay.
most other folks. It would apply to us, since we're in Marion County, except as an excluded city, we were given the authority to opt out and have our own, which we did, way back when. You know, you can kind of go on through here, rent offices, and most of those aren't really relevant for, but some of them that are, contract for the construction of local public improvements, and then that's defined, are structures that are necessary for redevelopment of areas needing redevelopment or economic development within the corporate boundaries of the unit. Any structure that enhances development or economic development. Now, that's a general authority, but if you go on, it's pretty clear that that's limited to those improvements that you can show that are physically connected to TIF area, that serve a TIF area or benefit a TIF area. In other words, benefit, you know, by doing something within the city, it benefits the allocation area fairly clearly. And, you know, financial assistance, bonding, you'll see that. If Jeff were here, he would talk more about that. So those are kind of, that's kind of the general powers. But then there's a whole bunch of other sections that aren't as long that follow, and I don't have all of them, but I've got a lot of them. There's a typo here. It says disperse of acquired property on the 36-7-14-22-7. Should be dispose of acquired property.
Oh,
After appraisal by the two appraisers who are either licensed professional appraisers, and, you know, most likely they would have to be commercial appraisers, because most residential appraisers, unless we're talking about houses, will tell you we're not licensed to do that, you know, if we're talking about a business or commercial property. Or employees of the city who are familiar with the value of the property. So that might be perhaps Brad, or someone, Phil, maybe. I don't know, but if you've got employees who've been here a long time and have a pretty good idea what properties are selling for, particularly residential, they could serve as one of the appraisers.
A question on that. So even though that, under that subdivision 2 of employees of the city who are familiar with the property, do they still have to do an appraisal or fill out any forms as DLGF or State Board of Accounts say, hey, when you do this, you still have to fill out the right forms, or you have to include all these things to make it a proper appraisal? Is there like limitations, you know, under regulation or orders from other state agencies about that?
Not that I'm aware. Obviously, they should write out something and keep it in the files, so that passage of time and the change of people, someone doesn't say, well, that wasn't proper, they sold it too cheap to a buddy.
to dispute it, yeah.
You know, so I think that's important. Now, if you have a professional appraiser, they're gonna say that the ethics and the laws that govern them require them to make a very detailed report, which we're gonna charge you lots of money for. I know in the schools, which I represent a lot of public schools, there's one statute that we use a lot on when we have a bond issue. We were required to have 3 appraisals, 2 by professionals and 1 by a local guy who pays the taxes, the property taxes to the district, doesn't have to be licensed. It could be a business owner, it could be a house owner. And all we have to report to the court, but it's just, we just have a template document that's a page and a half that says that they viewed the property, they appraised the property, and here's the number, and they have no interest in the property, you know.
Okay.
And then the court issues an order confirming that.
That's interesting.
So I think the answer is no, but, you know, a good practice would be certainly to have something in writing that justifies what you did and keep it in your file so that there's not a question of, did somebody engage in a conflict of interest? Did someone try to help out a buddy?
Right.
But we don't have to do it that way. We can have licensed appraisers.
You can
We
have
do not have
No,
to
sure.
have
Yes.
an employee do it, which could certainly muddy the waters.
And you know, it depends on the thing being appraised. It could be pretty expensive if you're talking about a significant business property. For schools, for example, we will get something in the neighborhood of $2,500 to $3,500 per appraiser cost, something like that. You were talking about a vacant supermarket, it might be more, because then you got an income stream issue and, you know, all that.
But if it's a very small parcel that just needs to be
Yeah.
tied in
Yeah, it shouldn't
to the
be-
bigger
shouldn't
project
be-
or something, yeah. So there could be sometimes these these are parcels that tie into a big project. It could maybe something like that.
Now, in the next one that's in your packet, 36-7-14-35, subject to the approval of the Common Council, and Common Council is not the statutory term, it's fiscal body, what you'll see in the statute if you were to read it yourself. So some of this usually if it's got a number, A1, blah, 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 it's straight out of the code, but just because there's so much lead in, I wanted to keep the paper, I killed enough trees as it was. And you know who the Common Council is, so that first sentence is mine, but then what follows is straight out of the statute. I think the important one here is undertaking carry out any redevelopment project, urban renewal project, or housing program, and we'll get to some of that in a moment. There's some stuff on bonds and again, to sell bonds takes the approval of the unit, the Common Council in B. Then next on is any questions before I go on to the next section?
Just one quick question. When it says pay or retire any bonds or interest on them, when we mean to retire bonds, is that to pay them back? Essentially, is that when they approve the budget for the year?
Retire is when you make your last payment.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
You're done.
Okay, so will we, because I understand that we are retiring bonds this year. We're making our final payment this year, correct?
January, I think.
January of 2022.
2022, okay. So will that be, so when will the council act on that unless they already have? Will that be when we present our 2022 budget and say, in here is the final payment for that? Will you approve
don't-
under this, or will that be
I
a
don't-
special thing that they will
I
do?
don't think there's any action for them to take at
Yeah.
that point. It's before we enter into the obligation.
Ah, okay. Got it, okay.
Expenditure Authority. Pay the principal of and interest on any obligations, and by obligations, we're talking about usually bonds, leases, those kinds of. Payable solely from allocated tax proceeds which are incurred by the redevelopment district for the purpose of financing or refinancing the redevelopment of that allocation area. And by allocation area, we're talking about a TIF district. Establish, augment, or restore the debt service reserve. And Mr. Peterson talked about that we had to keep a certain amount that would be freed up after we made our last payment. That's what that's talking about. Pay the principal of and interest on bonds payable from allocated tax proceeds. And let me, Fran, I've got something for you. I didn't. And there's some stuff that's technical to the bond stuff that Jeff would probably be the better person to talk with you about on premium, redemption before maturity. Okay, G, okay. Now we're starting again. G, H, J, K, L are the ones that we talk about a lot indirectly at meetings. Reimburse the unit, meaning the city, for expenditures made by it for local public improvements, which include building, parking facilities, and other items described in section 25.1 that are physically located in or physically connected to that allocation area. So if the city does a public improvement, let's say they did some parking facilities to help out parking on Main Street or some other corridor, or some building, and they contracted for it, they paid for it, we are allowed to reimburse them for that if it is in an allocation area, if it's in a TIF district, or it's physically connected, located in or physically connected to. And physically connected to might be a road, a street, a sewer line, sidewalk, those kinds of things.
Okay, okay. Is there a limit or a timeline as far as when, if it's a past project that it would be allowed to help with that? Is there a timeline or a limit as when they can come back to the RDC and say, I just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I don't know of anything specific. There's certainly
Yeah.
nothing I've seen in the
I
statute.
just was
that's
curious,
specific,
yeah.
But you certainly would hope that it would be
Would
something
be
that's
more,
fairly,
yeah, within, yeah.
And hopefully it's something that you'd agreed to do
Yeah,
at
yeah.
the time they were entering into it. But, pay the expenses incurred by the Redevelopment Commission for local public improvements that are in the allocation or serving the allocation area. So we can pay, the RDC can pay expenses directly if it's in or serving the allocation area. And again, they have the same recitation of what those are: buildings, parking facilities, or other items described in section 25.1. Reimburse public and private entities for expenses incurred in training employees of industrial facilities that are located in the allocation area and on a parcel of real property that has been classified as industrial property under the rules of the Department of Local Government Finance.
Wait a minute.
LGF. Here, it has to be in the unit, and let's say, says reimburse public and private entities for expenses incurred. Let's say the Beech Grove City School District was asked by a new industry that was coming into the city, we need some trained machinists. You know, you're part of Central 9, the co-op that's for vocational ed. Can you train, 20 people that we're gonna hire if they get through the 2-year program and get a certificate. You can do that, and there's some limitations that you'll see after that. However, the total amount of money spent for this purpose in any year may not exceed the total amount of money in the fund, allocation fund, that is tributable to property taxes paid by the industrial facility. So, the amount of money that you would reimburse a public or private entity for that kind of training for an industry that has come in can't exceed the property taxes for that year that you're already getting from the industrial facility. And this could be an issue because usually when a new business of any size comes in, they come in with their hand out, asking for tax abatement for, up to 5 years and at a certain percentage from, 20% to 100%. And so there wouldn't be any taxes during that period. So that might negate the ability to use this if it was a business. That's not 100% crystal clear, but that would seem to be the case, and it would be something that we would need to explore if we had somebody that wanted both the training and they wanted the abatement. Now, we don't grant abatements. RDC doesn't grant abatements, but there has to be a recommendation from the city as to whether an abatement is granted. Marion County is the one that grants or doesn't grant the abatement of property and certain personal property, certain, expensive equipment, there's abatement.
And that could be a slippery slope if you paid somebody to advance someone's skills, and then what, does the company disperse them to a different area? I mean, you'd have to, we would pay to advance their skills, and then
Well,
they obligated to stay.
Presumably, you're training local kids.
Yeah, okay.
Who are not likely
Okay.
to quickly move to another part of the country.
Get those skills and then move, okay.
You can have, and I don't think we've probably done it, you can have what a lot of cities do, and sometimes it's effective and sometimes it's not. You can have what's called a clawback agreement. And a clawback agreement is an agreement that says, yes, we will build your sewer line, we will build some roads into your facility you're gonna build. We'll do A, B, C, D, and E, but you have to agree that you'll hire X number of employees making at least Y amount of money for at least Z years, or you're going to have to pay back all or some portion that the clawback agreement sets out. That's wise to do if you're going to spend big dollars because I know Greenwood spent $6 or $7 million for a small pharmaceutical company that was going to build. And then they didn't count. I don't know whether it was, the economy or whether it changed their mind, but so that's something to keep in mind, that kind of thing is important. Next, L, pay the cost of carrying out an eligible efficiency project. Efficiency project is defined, and I don't have the section that's referred to in your materials. Energy efficiency project is something that lowers the utility cost of the city. And, the LED lights might qualify. I don't know. I haven't researched that, but I think it qualified under other things. But anyway, I thought that's interesting. I hadn't noticed that before, that eligible efficiency projects. And then, going on down, other section, acquire real property if agreement to require, and this is important too. If there's a big ask of an RDC, RDC doesn't need permission if it doesn't have to bond, if it has the cash. It doesn't have to ask permission of the common council or the mayor, unless, well, one, you don't have to go into debt by bonding, but that your payments are less than 3 years. In other words, you're not leasing it for more than 3 years. And the cost has to be less than $5 million. If it exceeds those thresholds, you've got to get city council approval.
So if we're only paying it for 3 years, or we're spending less than $5 million in cash, we can just do
Got to
it?
meet both of those things. Yeah, and you're not incurring bonded indebtedness.
Okay, so we're just buying it outright.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, presumably, it was in your budget that you submitted to the common council. But anyway,
Real quick question, just out of curiosity, again, would that allow us to support the new police station? I'm just curious, with a certain dollar amount for its development?
I think so. I think a credible argument could be made. Fire stations and police stations where they're needed, improvements are needed, supports the entire unit.
And it improves the whole city, and it
Yeah.
actually
It makes
advances.
it makes
yeah.
it safer.
It advances the whole city, can actually increase the market value of the city and homeowners, okay.
Again,
Okay, I'm just curious.
that's my opinion,
Okay, okay,
State Board of Accounts has been known to disagree with.
okay, just curious.
Here's something that might seem strange to you. RDCs can levy a tax rate, not for all the sort of things that the RDC has been doing, but for its own, like paying of attorney's fees, financial advisor, surveys, appraisals. We don't have, and as far as I know, have never had a tax levy. This must be how Carmel and Fishers, all of them have such large, either that or their city councils subsidize their RDC in some capacity. And it's a very specific limited rate. It can't exceed essentially 1/3 of a cent per $100. But if at some point you would want to employ an employee, even part-time, this would be one way you could do it. Special development programs, that's the next grouping. And these, how are we running on time?
Oh, the time is 9:41, so I think we're good.
Yeah, well, we'll have to hurry because I know, hi, Rhonda, you're already here.
I do, before you continue, I do want to ask, do we want to recess at like 9:55? If
Yeah.
anyone has to use the restroom or
Yes,
needs to
that-
stretch or something? Okay.
Take a quick
I
5-minute
will let
break.
you, I'll be checking, if other one can check me, let me know when it's 9:50, so I can say, Bob, we have 5 more minutes, and then
Okay.
we'll do a, recess at 9:55. Continue.
Set up the projector, get that going, so we're ready to roll.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I use this wall right here?
Sure.
Whatever wall you think is best, I would best project.
And whatever wall Tim said he could pick up on if that matters.
Oh, yeah, that too, because,
Yeah.
we're filming, and so like, people want to go back and
Yeah.
watch.
I don't know how that.
We can ask,
Yeah, ask
Yeah,
him.
ask
He
Tim.
can probably tell you which one to put it on.
Which, what wall
So, there's a number of special programs, there's urban renewals. And this has to do with acquiring to demolish or remove or rehabilitate buildings that you think are unhealthy, unsanitary, unsafe, that Kathy has cited repeatedly.
Oh, this is we're talking about
Yeah.
your day
Yeah.
job. Okay.
So, anyway, and then, there's
But,
authority to make plans for carrying out a program of voluntary repair and rehabilitation. And you can read this on that one on your own. There's urban rehabilitation program to use private and public resources to eliminate and prevent the conditions described in 36713 in urban areas, and that's basically blight. To encourage needed urban rehabilitation, to undertake feasible activities that are suitably employed, neighborhood development, that's another program. You can read through these, and some of that allows you to apply for federal assistance, grants to improve a whole neighborhood.
What? Well, actually, I have a number of questions. First one is, what does it mean by private resources? Are we allowed to take in grants? Could we accept money from a private individual saying, I want to give $1 million to the RDC to do these things?
You may.
We could take that, we can make an agreement.
Specific
to take that
section,
money.
it says that you may accept gifts, let me see here. 1 second.
that means I need to put the RDC in my will?
Hey, you have money, you want to give it to us? Hey, well,
If you want to, put us in your will, let's see, let's see here. It's under miscellaneous provisions of note. Let's see here. Yes, 36.7.14.26B, an RDC may accept gifts to be deposited into its capital fund.
capital fund, okay? And so we could, at least in acquiring property for redevelopment purposes, we could levy property taxes, we could.
No, you can't level, the levy is only for raising the money to essentially run the RDC.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
The way an RDC has money to do the other things is there's a base year that's established once a TIF district is set up. And the TIF district is set up by identifying properties that are going to be within it. And the RDC basically gets the money that's produced by the assessed value increase from the base year.
okay,
And we don't levy that tax. The city levies the tax. It's just that anything that's above the base year goes to the RDC rather than to the city proper.
okay. So there's that, there's private, and then you mentioned grants.
But yes, there's federal assistance that's mentioned in 36.7.14.36. Redevelopment Commission may apply for and accept advances, loans, grants, contributions, and any other form of financial assistance from the federal government, may contract with the federal government for any cost arising from a neighborhood development program. And Beech Grove Station was a neighborhood development Community Development Corporation, I believe it was called, and it was to essentially to make affordable housing for senior citizens.
Yes.
And I don't know if this will be actually a question for later when Rhonda Cook gives her presentation, but what, do you know, like as a survey, what type of grants are out there, what we should be looking at right now based on our current plan and what we're doing now? And also potentially when we start and get into the process of updating our plan and looking at other things to do over, say, the next 10 years? What, is there a whole lot out there? What's the field out there for?
I don't know what's out there, and I'm not sure who the city uses as a grant writer.
I think we do.
But, boy, if somebody
I
could
know.
come up with a big grant to completely remediate that dump.
Yes, I think there's federal, I
And I
was,
don't want to get into that.
no, but it's true, I've heard there's federal grants that are, that's a big thing.
I mean, that, because that's what it's gonna,
Yeah.
the cost
Yeah.
of that kind of improvement
yes.
is just extensive. And there's, beautification grants, there's, Okra has, those, and we've talked about them at meetings. I think we're getting pretty close, this might be a good time to,
It's,
It is 9:48. So if there's any, I would say if there's any, like, one more subject you see in here that we want to
Okay.
cover, we have, I'd say, well, at least 5 more minutes, then I said let's do that, and then we'll
Okay.
recess till
okay.
10.
There's a residential housing, this one's really new,
Oh, cool.
and this might address some of the things that Kathy was thinking about. I'm not familiar in terms of its use, but it's a relatively new provision. And including the special tax. So it's saying that a special tax can be levied, this is an exception, for purposes of the Residential Housing Development Program and bonds issued. And so this might be where you're essentially buying residential houses and then turning around and selling them. There's not a whole lot of detail on that section. Then age-restricted housing, which Beech Grove Station would,
okay.
was age-restricted. I'll just point out on regulatory statutes, we're subject to audit by the State Board of Accounts, we're subject to the public meeting law, and we're subject to the access to public record. Okay, here, houses. 36-7, 14, 12-4, an RDC may not own or lease or otherwise hold a simple family dwelling or condominium unit for purposes of leasing for use by an individual. You can't get into the rental.
Okay, sure.
And you may not exercise the power of eminent domain. The city can, but the RDC cannot.
That would kind of fall into that maintenance then thing, I would think. You do.
Yeah. So we're not
You
allowed.
can't,
This is important. Required reports and responsibilities before June 15th, determine the amount, if any, by which the assessed value of the taxable property minus the base assessed value and multiplied by the estimated rate will exceed, that's what Jeff was talking about.
yes, yeah.
Not later than April 15th, and he's already done this, file with the mayor and common council a report setting out the RDC's activities for the preceding year. In other words, what did you accomplish? And then it goes into more detail, and you can read that, but that's something that your financial advisor has filed and does. Revenues received, your expenses paid, your fund balances, maturity date on your bonds. When it says obligations or outstanding obligations, it's usually talking about bonds. The amount paid on outstanding obligations, a list of the parcels and depreciable personal property of any designated taxpayer. So when he files this, he has to list all the parcels in that TIF district by tax card ID number. And then historical data on the establishment of the TIF district. And it's, this report, Jim has to electronically upload it. Some of your duties are further back here, 36, 14, 11. investigate, study, and survey areas needing redevelopment within the corporate boundaries of the unit, study, determine, and extent possible, combat the causes of areas needing redevelopment, promote the use of land in a manner that best serves the interest of the unit, cooperate with the department agencies of the unit and other government entities, and with public instrumentalities and corporate bodies created by state law in a manner that best serves the purposes of this chapter, meaning redevelopment or development, make findings and reports on activities and keep those reports open to inspection by the public, select and acquire the areas needing redevelopment to be redeveloped, replan and dispose of the areas needing development in a manner that best serves the social and economic interest of the unit and its inhabitants. And so replan would be like redo your comprehensive plan at some point. And then additional responsibilities you can see, and I think we're probably about out of time.
The time is 9:52, yes, so if we're good here?
Yep.
Okay, Bob, if I ask for a recess, can I ask for it just by unanimous consent or something, or do I have to take a vote on it?
I think consent.
Okay. Is there consent to take a recess until 10 a.m.?
Yeah. Yes.
Hearing no objection, we are in recess until 10 a.m. Bob, I have 2 questions for you regarding your 4, and we are back from recess. I will now turn it over to Rhonda Cook from the Redevelopment Association to give a presentation. Rhonda,
Yeah.
take it away.
Yeah, thank you. So the Redevelopment Association of Indiana is an affiliate group of AIM. AIM stands for Accelerate Indiana Municipalities, and it is the association that represents mayors, city and town officials throughout the state, city and town employees. We advocate for them at the legislature and do training and training programs, networking programs, conferences. So all of the groups within AIM have kind of their own meeting times. For instance, the Indiana Conference of Mayors, the mayors just get together and talk about mayors' things, and clerk treasurers get together and talk about clerk treasurers' things. Well, Redevelopment Association of Indiana is where redevelopment commission members and anyone who's really interested in redevelopment or economic development, it is kind of their subgroup, and they can get in the weeds then on their issues and reporting requirements, those things that only redevelopment commissions deal with. So I am an attorney. Previous to working at AIM, I was at the Indiana Economic Development Corporation under the Daniels administration. I was vice president and counsel. You've probably worked with that state agency before, quasi-governmental agency. I worked for Ice Miller as a bond attorney before that, and came from really local government, working for the Association of Indiana Counties, where I did lobbying and training for county officials, and worked for the state legislature, kind of where I got my first start and my first job. So now I've been at AIM since 2008, and really this is the area that I enjoy most. It's the economic development, redevelopment, turning communities into something great. I love to see that whole process, and I love working with the Redevelopment Association most especially. So just a little bit about today's presentation. I want to talk about property taxes and tax caps and some history. And this may be kind of basic for you, but this is being televised, and I just want to let the public know some of this basic information and terminology so that we can have a more in-depth discussion.
Some of us are new to the board, so.
Okay. And you know what? That happens with all
That's the
elected
beginning.
officials, right? Like, if someone gets newly elected, this is all new stuff, and it's complicated, and I'm trying to break it down bit by bit, and even using visuals to help you understand, because some people that have done this for a really long time have said, oh, okay, I get it now with seeing visuals. Talking a little bit about funding development and bonding, and then one thing I was asked to talk about was how you create your vision, how you carry that vision out, and how that happens. We'll then need to talk about the mechanics of TIF, and then making policy decisions in regard to TIF. Bob was right when he said that a lot of redevelopment commissions don't have a departmental budget. That's very common. They just operate to handle the TIF revenues. For the ones that do have a tax levy, just like in the police department or another department, use that departmental money for buying your pens and pencils or your supplies, or like you said, hiring an employee, or operational type things, because TIF can't be used for operations, and so that's the way that you would pay for those employees. But it's not that uncommon that you wouldn't have a city line item departmental budget for a redevelopment department. Okay. Sure. Yeah. And if it's project related, then you can pay for it out of TIF. You can pay for consultants out of TIF if it's project related. So we can get into that a little bit later. Okay, so I'm going to start with property taxes. Oops, and I shouldn't light my papers there because the microphone is there. So property taxes are the primary way that governments are funded. They fund counties, cities, towns, townships, libraries, other special taxing districts, like fire districts or solid waste districts. It's really our core revenue source for local government. And one thing that I'll note that is flexible about property taxes is that they can be used to pay for operations and for salaries. And that's one of the things that, at least in some people I've been talking to lately, is I'm from Hancock County, and in that county we're growing so quickly that the growth is requiring people, like more firefighters and more, so we can create the growth with the TIF money, but we can't pay for the people to help us manage all of it. We can't pay for the operations. And that's just due to the nature of the way the law is set up, and how we can fund people and operations and salaries versus paying for projects. And I'll talk about that a little bit too, because I don't know if that's a problem here, but it is where I come from, just because we're growing so quickly. Okay, so one thing that is really clear to point out, and I want to use a visual here for assessed value, because it is not dollars, it is not spendable dollars, it is a value on paper, okay? That's why I use this visual with the clipboard. So this is when the county assessor in Marion County will go out and assess commercial property, residential property, ag property, if there is still ag property in Marion County, and assign it a value. And that's a value for purposes of our tax formula. It's not real money when we talk about that. It's just a value, okay, expressed in a dollar amount. Okay, so it's really important to know that it's not real money, and that people can't appeal their assessed values. They can appeal and say, I don't think your value that you assign to my property is correct. And so that gets really interesting when someone appeals, because what we thought we had coming in and our projections can then change because of people appealing, especially when it's a large industrial company appealing, and they are doing it a lot. And I'll just say there are consultants out there who will say, kind of on a contingency fee basis, let me try your appeal, let me try to get an appeal for you. And they'll say, okay, go ahead and try. What have I got to lose? And if we get the appeal, then I save money on my taxes. And, if you're a corporate attorney, I would probably say that's a prudent thing to do, is try to make, to appeal that and make sure it's verifiable. And that's happening a lot, and that affects our TIF when we have appeals of our assessed values. Okay, then in my wooden bucket here example, this is the tax levy, property tax levy, and here we are talking about spendable dollars to run government. Property taxes, spendable dollars to run government. But you'll note here that we come up with our budget, and we come up with how much we think we need to run government, what it's going to cost for that year. But then note that the Department of Local Government Finance sets a maximum amount for us. They only allow us to grow from year to year a certain amount. And last year, that formula came out to be 4.2%. So we could grow our budget in 2021 4.2% over 2020. They tell us each year that calculation, what it is, and it's been about 3.5%, 4.2%. I won't get into how they calculate that formula, but they just let us know each year. So the maximum amount we have to run government is set by the DLGF, and in most places they max out every year. Okay, so here in a very simplistic form is our property tax formula. So you start with your assessed value. The county assessor will add up all the property values, commercial, residential, agricultural, and get $1 amount. It's a value, not real dollars, for all the property within the county. And then you set the levy for all the taxing districts. City, county, they each set their own levy. And remember, that's a limited amount by the DLGF each year. And that will give you your tax rate. It's just a simple formula. So let's say this example is for county government. And we add up all the taxable property in the county, and that's $500 million. And since our tax rate is applied to every $100 of assessed value for purposes of this formula, we divide by 100, and that gives us $5 million. So our AV number, that value is $5 million. And then we need our levy for what spendable dollars we want to run government is $10 million. So that's just the way we come up with our tax rate. And that would be a $2 tax rate to generate $10 million off of that assessed value. So you can see that when you get a bigger number on the AV side, what happens? Okay, we grow our AV by getting more people to be taxed and more property to tax. Let's say we increase our AV through the work we've done with our economic development, and now instead of $500 million, we have $700 million. So for purposes of this formula, we divide by 100, and that gives us 7 million. We still need 10 million to run government. That's our dollars to pay salaries, police, everything. It lowers our tax rate to 1.4285. It's just the formula. So what this means is when we have more taxable property, all taxpayers get to pay less. Okay? Their rate goes down. That's a good thing for us when it comes to tax caps, and I'll get into that in a minute. But we still generate the same amount of money to run government, still $10 million. It's just everybody pays a little less. Okay, that's the basic formula. Okay, now I'm going to have to give you a little history lesson about tax caps, because they just came into effect in 2008 when I started working for IACT, and now we're called AIM. But it's kind of new, and it's if you had to ask me, this was probably very controversial because it's just had a lot of ramifications that are playing out over the years now, and so we can debate whether they are good or bad, but it makes things really complex, and I'll show you why. Okay, so tax caps. I'll just give you this example. When I was at Ball State, in my public finance classes, our professor brought in this giant binder full of pictures of homes. And it would just say, all right, find a picture that looks like the home that you're trying to assess, if you're the county assessor, and the book will tell you what value the home is worth, like 3-bedroom home, 2 baths, a certain, space of yard, and we'll find a comparable property in the book, and then we'll apply that value to that home. Okay, so over time, though, values used to depreciate, and your value would go down over time. So if you had a really old home, your value was going to be, decreasing because there was that depreciation. What happened in 1990 was that there was a Supreme Court case, and it was out of the town of St. John, which is up in Lake County. And are you from there? Okay. Okay. So that case said that this method of picking a picture out in the book and saying this is what my property is worth is not a very verifiable process. That's very random and subjective. And that's not really true around the whole state. It probably operates a little differently. And in our Constitution, it tells us that we have to have a uniform method of taxation. So the Supreme Court said our current assessing method is unconstitutional because it's not uniform. They're doing it a little differently everywhere across the state. So then we switched to what we call a market value system, where now they base your assessed value and the calculation of how much your property is worth and valued on market sales data. So for instance, in my neighborhood, if a house sells in my neighborhood that's comparable to mine, they're going to look at that sales, how much did that sell for? That's probably what we're going to now say your house is valued at, because we can tell if theirs sold for, $300,000 and yours is just 1 bedroom less, and it's going to be like, $250 or something. So we now base our assessed values on market value data, okay? On that sales data. Think of what that did to the homes on Meridian Street in Indianapolis. Every year, those homes were going down in value, but not really, because in market value, those prices kept going up and up and in the millions, right? So now those people living in those heavy, where the values went way up, all of a sudden, were paying a lot more taxes. And they were like screaming that, that I can't afford this all of a sudden, these high taxes are crazy. Another place where it happened a lot was like on lake properties, like around, let's say, Culver. They have a lake there, Maxinkuckee, and some people had owned these lake cottages for years in their family, and they inherited a little cottage. But then around them, all this new houses were being built and being sold for a lot of money, which then made their little cottage price go way up in value, and they couldn't afford their taxes anymore. So there were people being literally priced out of their family homes because the taxes were so high, and they went up just in a matter of a few years, So that caused this outcry. And I will just say it really happened in certain hot spots within Indiana, like the couple examples I just gave you. So then Governor Daniels said he was going to do something about that. And in 2008, he came up with the tax cap idea and says you will never pay more than a certain percentage of your value in property taxes. So if for a homestead, a residential property that you're using as your main home, you'll never pay more than 1% of your assessed value. For ag property or for like apartments or your second lake home, 2%, and for commercial property, 3%. So let's look at this example. What does that mean for local government? Let's say we have a commercial property and its net assessed value is $1 million. The tax rate for this example is $4, so that property would pay $40,000 in taxes. But their taxes are capped at 3%, so that means that they're only going to pay $30,000 in taxes, and they'll get that $10,000 as a credit, a tax credit. But that $10,000 that they get as a tax credit to that taxpayer is just a loss to local government. That is money we don't get to collect. All right, so back then, when they put tax caps in place, the legislators, because it had to be a piece of a bill that passed to put the governor's scheme in place here, they told local governments, you won't have to do with less money to operate because we know we can't collect as much as we could. You're just going to have to find it out of a different pocket. You're going to have to find a different way of collecting it. For instance, you're going to need to increase your income tax, or you're going to need to put on a fee, or you're going to need to put on a hydrant rental, or you're going to need to collect a special tax, or you can still have that money to operate government, but you need to get it from someplace else other than property taxes. The problem with that is that since that legislation went into effect, a lot of new people are at the General Assembly that don't remember that promise back then. And we have a lot of people elected to local government who are really, conservative people that don't believe in a lot of putting on a lot of new taxes. And it's not really politically savvy, right, to put on a bunch of new taxes. But when you hear the whole story behind it of why you need to, because this is what we were told we needed to do, they did give us more flexibility with income taxes, that we could levy new taxes locally from the income tax area. Food and beverage tax would be another one you could levy, or innkeeper's tax. We were supposed to look at all these different ways of offsetting that impact from the tax cap. Don't keep in mind too that everything else has gone up in cost, like the price of steel, the price of lumber, the things we need to build projects. that's all been going up, but yet we have this really hard hit where we can't raise what we used to be able to raise with property taxes. That's why all these other revenue sources, and not being shy about raising those was kind of the whole scope of the picture, right? Okay, we also had a constitutional amendment that went in at that time. If you remember, that there was a question that all the voters voted on that said, you know, do you want your property taxes to be capped at 1%, 2%, and 3%? Everybody said yes, you know. but they really didn't say, but keep in mind your income taxes may go up, or your schools may not have what they need. You may have to cut teachers, which most schools did. They didn't really tell that side of the story on that ballot question. And so, but everybody said, oh yes, we want our property taxes to be capped at 1%, 2%, and 3%. So that was a pretty easy sell. And the reason they had to do that too is because with the 1%, 2%, and 3%, that really wasn't a uniform scheme anymore, and our Constitution requires a uniform scheme of taxation. And so that's why that constitutional amendment was needed. Let's see. So, I should say too that it doesn't mean that your taxes will never go up with the 1%, 2%, and 3%, because they still can. You know, your assessed value can go up. Your market value goes up if you improve your communities, and now homes are selling for more. That helps your bottom line.
I do have a question on that. So I'll just give you a specific example for the street I live on. 4 houses down from me, a house just sold for, it was just under $200,000. So I'll just say it was at $200,000. I bought my house 2 years ago at $155,000. My assumption is that when the assessor comes around this year for next year's tax, whenever he reassesses, they'll look at all those market values, and so my property will increase by
that
a
will
certain
make
amount.
that will make your taxes go up.
Okay.
Yeah, because that neighborhood had a property that sold for more, right?
Not above 1%.
But
But
you're
not
still
filed with
capped.
the
1% of your gross assessed value. You're still.
But on top of the other things like the school, we had the referendum that passed
Uh-huh.
a year ago
Okay.
or so on, so, but on top of all, everything,
Yeah, yeah.
On top of that stuff, 1%, then the additional.
Right. So you as a homeowner, that's a kind of double-edged sword, right? Because you as a homeowner, now you think, but I can sell my property for more if I ever get ready to sell, right? But if I'm going to live there for a while, that just means my value is more and I'm going to pay more taxes. But maybe you're living in a nicer neighborhood, or there's, there's been improvements to homes and it's just a nicer place to live. So, that's exactly right. Right, so your taxes can still go up because what you just said, that example. Well, it could be a referendum from a school too, and that's, I think your school is very forward thinking for looking at that. So we can talk about that a little bit more too. The thing that it did though, with tax caps, is it put all taxing units within the same county sharing one piece of the pie. And this didn't used to be like this before we had tax caps. So here's this picture. Before you could raise your levy when you needed it, if you were the city, and then let it fall back, just when you needed things, right? But now we're under one piece of the pie, and anytime someone's pie piece gets bigger, someone else's piece has to get smaller. And when I say someone else, I mean the library district, or if the school gets bigger, city government's got to get smaller because there's only one pie. This picture right here is from 2018 data, and it's just general information from the DLGF. It's not exclusively for this location, but it just shows you in general across the state how the pie breaks down. So that big orange section, that's the school. So we're talking property tax dollars, right? And schools take most of our property tax dollars. But keep in mind, schools don't get most of their money from property tax dollars. They get most of their money from the school funding formula. And that's based on per pupil, a per pupil amount. But they still need property tax dollars for their buildings and for their buses and for their capital things. They can use a little bit of their capital money toward school teacher salaries and things like that. That's called their education fund. And then let's see, the section with the dark orange at the 0.24%, I don't know if this can get any sharper, but let me see if that makes a difference. I think it's just kind of because it's blown up so bigly, but so at a large scale. That's city government. County government is the tan, and then we have special units, libraries, townships. You know, the point is that whenever someone's piece of the pie gets bigger, or they add a debt, they add a bond issue, then someone else has to scoot back. Or if you don't, you're going to be hitting tax caps, and then you'll have cap loss. Okay? Because
Referendum, giving more money, that didn't affect that.
now referendum with the school, what you're talking about, and they can do an operating budget. I should say education fund. They can use it for salaries and things like that. The schools can do referendums just to run the teacher's salaries, general operations, what they call that, their education fund. That is outside of the tax caps. Because basically what the voters have said is, like, they've already told us that they want to have the protection of the 1%, 2%, and 3%. But when they vote for a special referendum, they're saying, but we're willing for this project to go outside of the 1%, 2%, and 3% protection. Now, local governments can do referendums too. If your project is of a certain amount, you can do it for projects, but you can't do it for operating dollars. So that's a downfall there, but schools can. Okay, this example I think is really interesting, and I don't know how clearly you can see this, but this is of Delaware County and Muncie. And I use this example because we're talking about a community that doesn't have a lot of tax base. So on that formula, AV times tax rate equals levy, they don't have a lot of AV. That AV number is not very high. And why is it not very high? Because they have a university there. It's tax exempt. They have a hospital there, tax exempt. They have a lot of social, charitable type places that are nonprofits, and they are tax exempt. So their AV number is not very high on that formula because there's not that many people to pay taxes. There's a lot of tax exempt people. So what does that do when you don't have a very big AV number? It really hurts you in the tax caps. And I'll show you here. So let's look at City of Muncie. If we ask them how much the DLGF will let them levy in property taxes, it's $35.2 million. That's what they should be able to raise in their wooden bucket to run government. But because they don't have a very big number on the AV formula side, they have a lot of tax cap loss. They have a lot of people that are hitting that percentage and getting that credit, and then that loss to local government. And to the tune of $17.6 million that they can't generate in Muncie to run government. So now they're left with $17.6 million to operate government. So they can't generate half of their budget because they don't have a big enough number of the AV, on that formula.
So that formula, that $35.2 million for the city is essentially what they've been able to raise in the past, what DLGF says that you can raise it up to. But because of the circuit breakers, they lose half of what they could raise. And that's the maximum they can raise. There's still the actual collection part. So
yeah, and they can collect $17.6 million. Just so happens it's half. They can't collect half their budget.
But that's the maximum, assuming they had 100% collection rate, which I assume no unit of government has ever had, ever.
Yeah. Well, so what it tells you is how do they make up half their property tax shortfall with other taxes, like income taxes? That's probably not going to happen to that tune, Okay, so if you look at everybody's in the same boat. All the taxing units within that county. Library, they should have had $5.5 million to operate, but now with tax caps they lose $2.6 million they can't collect, and they have $2.9 million to operate. That's almost half,
And
So
this is not a question for today. I'd love to know where there's ever been a study on that of saying, but how do local governments plan for that? It's like, we can raise this, but they had to have it in the back of their mind saying, but we're never going to raise this, so how we say, we want to do this, this is what our
Yeah.
budget should be,
Yeah.
but we really are only gonna have a budget for this, so how do you do both things
Okay.
to protect that levy, but then plan for, what are we actually going to get?
That's a really good question, because what I say is local governments can almost adjust to anything as long as you give them like enough time to adjust. Like if you give them 2 or 3 years to like say, okay, we know this is coming, we'll put this on a rainy day, we won't spend this here, we won't, but we don't know this impact really from year to year to year. We find out every year how many people are gonna appeal, right? We don't know if they're gonna, what if one of your major industries that's worth a big chunk of your tax base appeals their taxes, that affects you hard the next year, that they have appealed and now that's all up in the air. Or we had a downturn in the economy a few years ago and that affected, our market values. Homes weren't selling for a lot. That affected all of our tax caps. So that is the new challenge to local governments is we can plan for anything, but this really makes it hard to plan. Okay.
What happens if local governments can't make their budget? Then the state somehow comes in and becomes their budgetary overseers then?
No, you cut.
They
You
cut
can't
it.
make budget, you gotta start
But
cutting.
still, but it could be a situation.
You mean, let's say that you kind of get in a bankruptcy situation?
Yeah, the state has to come in and become.
Well, that became all pretty interesting when we were passing tax caps because we'd always had very reliable repayment of debt on our bonds because we could just, whenever we needed what we needed, we'd just levy a property tax. We could tell the bondholders that we will just levy the tax and you will have it. And now with tax caps, we can't say that anymore. We can say we can levy it up to that point and then we can't get you any more money, bondholders. So that did kind of affect the bond market. And one thing they did to protect our debt issuance capabilities was they said that if we ever gotten to the point where we couldn't repay our bonds, we get monthly distributions of our income tax money from the state treasurer, state auditor treasurer, that they will just usurp that money they will just take that and use it to pay off our bonds. But that's our income tax money that the state will step in and I can't remember the word they used for it, but they will just intercept. That's
They
the
do
word.
that on schools on the
Yeah.
state distribution formula
Yeah.
if somebody couldn't pay.
If you can't pay, because look, we can't declare bankruptcy, local units can't in Indiana. So the state will step in and intercept other monies that's supposed to be coming our way, which could affect other bonds, So, question came up, someone asked me, what are bonds? I hear this about bonds, what is it? Okay, well, local governments just can't go to a bank and get a loan like you can a mortgage for your house, but it's really the same concept. It's just different in the fact that when local governments need money, when government needs money, we have access to the municipal bond market. So we just put word out that we need to raise $5 million, and then we go out to the bond market and we say, who will give us $5 million at the lowest interest rate? And it's kind of like an auction, whoever will, money is money. We're getting, it's fungible, so we take the lowest interest rate, and that's how we fund our projects through the bond market. Bonds can also be sold at negotiated sale, and whenever you issue bonds, you do need sophisticated professionals. You need bond attorneys and financial advisors. So there's what we call issuance cost to that, which is something that's just part of it that we have to pay. It's kind of like when you have a mortgage and there's certain set fees you have to pay, like your closing fee or whatever. I mean, that's just part of issuing the debt.
Well, our RDC actually did that because we had the bond that we're paying off now. We were able to renegotiate the rate.
Yeah, we refunded in 2016.
Yeah.
One thing that I learned in public finance, with studying public finance, and this is it's not intuitive to how we've grown up as kids and how we've been raised. We were told, save your money, and when you have enough to buy it, you can buy that new toy, you know, or whatever it is you want. But when it comes to public finance and government projects, that's not always the most prudent thing to do, is save your money until you have enough to buy something kind of big, like a building. And that's because if you think about it, you've collected all this money from people who have lived in your community, and by the time you build that building, those people are probably going to be dead, or they've moved away. So you're taxing people for things that they never get any use out of. So it's better to finance that, and that's perfectly acceptable, you know, to finance a project and then let the people who are actually going to use that project pay for it over time. And the useful life of a building is usually 25, 30 years. Let them make those payments, and they're paying for that. Their tax money goes for something they actually get to use. So it's just a concept that's widely understood in public finance circles, but it's not what we've learned as kids, you know, to like save your money until you have enough to buy it. Just make that point. Okay, I want to talk about the community's vision and why communication in this process and determining what your vision is really important. And it's not only for the elected officials, the appointed officials, but it's for all the citizens in your community to have input. And it's really important that they have input. So it starts out with your comprehensive plan. And it's a multi-page written document, and you can hire consultants to come in and help you with writing it. They're going to look at your whole dynamic of your community, what industries you have, what your average wage is, what your schools are like, what the school letter grade rating is on your schools and how good they are, how much maybe agricultural property you have, what's your population. They're going to look at all your demographics and statistics. And you're going to look at then where things are located and what types of industries you want to grow here or what you're well suited for. Maybe you have natural geographic terrain, like maybe you have a river or you have hills that, you know, are great for hiking or outdoor recreation, or it depends on like what you have to offer and how you want to build on that. Once you develop what your vision is and you've had your community come in and maybe you do town hall meetings and you let people have input to what they want to see, and your consultant can help you through that, those listening tours, those going out and doing surveys or focus groups or design charrettes, you know, different ways that you can have input from your public, because it's important that you hear from all of them and what they want. That helps you shape your zoning laws. So now that you can say, in this area, we're going to make that industrial. This is well suited and these people over here are okay with that. We're going to make this area zoned industrial. We're going to strive to make this residential. And what kind of residential home buyer are we looking for in this community? What kind of wage, what kind of jobs do we have to offer, and what kind of wage do they need to earn? That's going to tell you, you know, what kind of home you can build and what your employers need in the terms of the employees that need to live around here and easily get to work. It's going to help you design your transportation structures and what kind of bus systems or whatever you need to get, you know, based on those people's incomes, and maybe they're going to need public transportation. Those are the kind of things that you put into a plan, and you have to start by just looking at what you have and what your people want. Another thing that I mentioned here, especially when I was working with the folks in my county, was what the role of an elected official is versus the role of a redevelopment commission member. Redevelopment commission members typically are appointed members, but it doesn't mean that they can't be elected. In the town of Dyer, their whole town council is also the redevelopment commission. They have a 5-member town council, but they're also the redevelopment commission members as well. So, you know, you can have elected officials like you do on your redevelopment commission. If you've got appointed members to your redevelopment commission, remember who appointed you, right? There's usually a 5-member RDC. 3 members come from the executive, which is the mayor, and 2 members from your council.
That's what Beech Group.
Okay. It's your job as redevelopment commission members to communicate with those people that appointed you to find out what their vision is and how you are there to carry out that vision. Because remember, they had to run for office and they had to campaign on something. And those people in your community elected them to carry out a vision that they campaigned on. And the voters can remove them at the next election and get someone else in. But they've put you in your position as an appointed member to help them carry out the vision that they ran on as an elected official. And I'll tell you, this is really important because the General Assembly has been faced with a lot of communities coming up and saying, we have a runaway redevelopment commission. You know, these are not elected people, and they have we don't know what they're doing, and we don't know, they're spending a lot of money, because you do have control over quite a bit of TIF money. And the General Assembly has put parameters, and I'm going to talk about some of those, in place to make sure that there is elected official oversight to the RDC. And they've taken away some RDC powers. You mentioned one of them, eminent domain. RDCs used to have eminent domain powers, but they don't anymore under the Indiana Code, because that was something that the General Assembly felt like that needed to go and only be in the hands of someone who was answerable directly to the public. So you got to understand that dynamic, and you have to understand that communicating with the body that appointed you is really, really important. Okay. Now, when you create a redevelopment commission, and you decide, would you say it was created in 2006 or something like that? 5 or 6. The reason why a lot of cities and towns, mayors and councils create a department of redevelopment is because it opens up the Indiana Code statutes on redevelopment to a new set of tools that the city never had access to before. And those are generally found in Indiana Code 36714. Not only does it allow you to set up an RDC, a redevelopment commission, it allows you to access the tool of TIF, and it allows you to access a lot of other tools. And one is like your ability to, say, buy and sell property, to sell it to be able to dispose of property in a lot simpler method than what the city could do. The Redevelopment Commission has tools to do that in a simpler method. You can negotiate, you can, with developers, you can exchange, like you could buy a property and hand it to a developer and let them develop it for a low price if they're gonna say they're gonna invest in it and do certain things that are eventually gonna get your AV number up, you know, because that's the goal, right, is to get that AV number up. You can contract for the construction of projects. You can provide financial assistance to help low-income families. You can provide grants and loans. That statute has a lot of tools in it that now are open to the city when you create the Department of Redevelopment. And it starts with the appointment of this body. Okay. I was going to hit on some of those things that the General Assembly over the years have put in place to make sure that the Redevelopment Commission is answerable to your elected people that appointed you. So there's a very unique part in the statute under 36714(9)(b) that says you are appointed for a 1-year term. Sometimes you're reappointed. They reappoint you for more than 1-year term. But that makes it easy that if you're not carrying out what the vision is, or maybe somebody gets taken out of office and a new person's appointed, that allows them to put their person in to carry out the vision that the community has now said, we've elected this new person and we want a different vision, like we want to change things up. So now it lets them put in a new redevelopment commission person because it's a 1-year appointment. But the really unique thing is that A redevelopment commission member can be removed for any reason, at any time. And that's unique. I mean, other boards and commissions, there has to be cause, you have to do something wrong, or there's, not with RDC members. You're there to carry out the vision of that elected person. And that's one of the things that the General Assembly has made clear, because you're supposed to be that conduit of the elected official. In my county, right now, there's just a need for better communication between what the RDC, that's why these slides are in here, because that was something they really needed to work on, was communicating better with their RDC members. And you might have great communication here, but in my county, that's where they're kind of struggling right now. So this is why I had put this in this presentation and talked about it. Some of the other things that the General Assembly has said is really important, that we only want an elected official to handle, because they're answerable to the public. So they took away your power of RDCs used to be able to use the power of eminent domain, basically taking someone's property for a public purpose and paying them for whatever the value of it is, but then saying we're going to knock down your property because we need a road to go there, or that's the power of eminent domain. It's actually where government can take their property. It's called a taking. And now RDCs can't do that. Only the elected bodies can do that. Let's see. Now your budget is overseen by the council. Now we go back to the fact that a lot of RDCs don't have a departmental budget, and that's normally what we're talking about. That goes back to the council. There are some places that have a TIF budget, I'll say, a TIF plan, like a spending plan. And I would advise that, like having a 5-year spending plan for projects that you're trying to tee up. If your council wants to look at that plan and approve it, they certainly can. But I wouldn't call that necessarily a budget like the statute is talking about, but that's certainly something the council can do, is look at that 5-year spending plan, because again, we're all trying to get on the same page, right? We're all trying to work together. You're also audited by the State Board of Accounts, just like any other governmental entity. You're subject to the open door law, where you have to have open public meetings, and if somebody wants access to records, that is also something RDC must comply with. It used to be that the RDC could appoint its own treasurer and handle its own bank account. Not anymore. When I was at AIM, probably, 2010, I want to say, 2012, that authority was taken away, and now the fiscal officer of the unit, which is your clerk treasurer, is now the treasurer for the RDC and for the TIF funds. You're also required to file reports with the council, keep them up to speed with the executive and with the Department of Local Government Finance. All of you are familiar with the gateway system? Yes or no? Gateway system, does that ring a bell? The Department of Local Government Finance has a public database on their website. I can show it to you later. And they have actually something called a TIF viewer. And you can get in and look by your, sort by your county and then that taxing unit, and you can look at how many TIF areas exist for that unit, how much basis value it has. There are just things that you have to report each year to the Department of Local Government Finance, and they keep that data that's accessible to the public in what they call the gateway database system. Okay. Key takeaway here is communication is key to getting everybody in the community on the same page. When communities do great things, it's because they've had a great method of communication. They've heard from their public, they know what the wants are. There's no surprises when this project happens, because the community already knows about it and knows that that's what they wanted, and have already stated, that's something we're all agreeable to, and that's what we want. And this area over here is going to be where we're going to develop that. Getting that communication between everybody is really important. And don't forget that your people change. You have some people that stay on from year to year or get reelected, and then you might have new people. So then we have to have these meetings again, right, to bring them up to speed again and get everybody on the same page again. So you gotta continually educate and communicate. Okay, here are the procedures for creating or amending a TIF area. And it's good to put these, to kind of explain these, because a lot of people say, well, they just went and did it and I didn't know what was going on. It's a really public process to create a TIF area. It goes through more than just you guys as Redevelopment Commission members. It goes to several different public bodies, your Plan Commission. There's plenty of opportunity to chime in when people say, I didn't know that was happening, you know. But you do have to post those public notices of your meetings. You could go beyond, you know, what is just required in the statute. You could have social media pages and websites, and that's when everybody really gets along better, is when you try to get the word out and you have a method of communicating with everybody, going beyond what's just in the statute that you have to post your meeting notice. So you establish a 5-member redevelopment commission, which is 5 voting members plus your school board advisory member. Some people put on a school board member that is a voting member, and that's okay too. You can do that. You know, like your school could be one. You could have your school official be one of your 5. Some places they have the school superintendent that's on the RDC, and believe me, they get along a lot better with the schools when that happens, because the superintendent's there and understands it all. You know, this is no big.
For a while, we had the superintendent was the advisory.
And maybe your superintendent doesn't have enough time. I mean, it could be a lot of time commitment, but maybe there's someone from the school you would think about that you would want to have on as a voting member, and that really helps them to be able to take the message back to the school board, and you're all playing better that way together. You prepare a TIF plan for the area, and it either calls for a redevelopment of the area or an economic development of the area, kind of depending on, there's 2 different routes in the statute, whether you follow the redevelopment methods or the economic development methods. There's a couple more tools available to you when you follow the redevelopment method, if it is something needing redevelopment that you don't have on the economic development side. But there's a couple steps you don't have to do in economic development. So it's just kind of weighing, like, is it a blank canvas for economic development, or is it something that we need to get in there and we got a brownfield or something, you know? And that will help you determine which route you're gonna go. The plan for the area, if you read one of these plans, it's not gonna state, we're gonna do this road at this time with this exact building. It's gonna be broader, because remember, it's gotta be a plan that lasts for 25 years. That's what you're thinking when you're doing it. So it's gotta be more conceptual, like, more broad, so that things that you don't even know about that will come on the table with a certain company later down the road can fit into the plan. You know, it's more generally stated, like, we're trying to grow businesses that have high salaries. We want this kind of, you're more general in your TIF plan for this area and how we want to develop it. You start by adopting a declaratory resolution, and then a factual report. When you adopt that declaratory resolution, that's the point when you mark that assessed value base date. And this will make, just remember that I said that, and when we get into the pictures in a minute, that will make sense to you. It's when you adopt that declaratory resolution, that kind of starts the date.
We created last year and 3 districts. One was for industry or commercial prospect we thought was coming in, ended up bought the property and never developed it. One that is building now, we created a small TIF district, and we did some other rejiggering because we had assessed value that was so low it was going to bring down everything, so we took it out. So that we
Yeah. Yeah. Some places don't even think about taking out parcels that their AVs drop and bring down your TIF, but that is something you kind of have to manage it over time, and that's kind of a good thing to do. But I know a lot of them didn't really think about that, or didn't know it's an ongoing management of your TIF area. So after after your declaratory resolution, your TIF plan is sent to the Plan Commission to make sure it complies with the overall comprehensive plan. Okay, now,
We're
here,
an excluded city, so
yeah,
we
this
didn't
is
have to
way
follow-
different.
We didn't
Okay.
have to follow the plan commission, but everything
Okay.
else we did.
Okay. And then, again, so everybody's in harmony. And then the order, the Plan Commission, if they say it is in compliance with the comprehensive plan, and yes, it looks like those two match up and harmonize, they will issue an order, and that order goes to, well, here I said county commissioners, that's gonna go back to your council. Probably should have corrected it for this purpose, for this presentation. You publish a notice of public hearing, you distribute your impact statements to your other taxing units, and you hold a public hearing by the RDC. And then, based on what people say at the hearing, you can either amend your declaratory resolution, you can reject it, or you can approve it. And maybe based on comments from people that come to your hearing, you might say, well, we need to tweak that. That's a good point. We need to tweak that a little bit in our plan, but thank you for bringing that. So then, at the end of the day, you approve your confirmatory resolution. If the plan is for the economic development, it could go back to one more step, back to the council again. I said commissioners here because I was talking to a county, but it would go back to your council. The RDC records the resolution and notifies the DLGF, and then you file it with the county auditor, because your county auditor is the one that's going to now, need to know that certain assessed values need to be captured in your TIF area. Okay. This is my little picture to explain overcoming the hurdle, is what I'm going to call it, okay? Tax increment financing is a tool that allows government to step in to provide government resources to overcome some type of hurdle that private industry won't do. Okay, so for example, normally government likes private industry to use their dollars to go improve something or build something, right? But let's say you have a parcel of land that private industry is not going to touch it. Why? Because it's polluted or it's a brownfield. Private industry is not going to overcome that hurdle because it's going to be too costly for them. They're going to go find a blank space somewhere that has water or sewer, and they can hook right up and use their, private money to build a building. So it could be that it's a brownfield, that the hurdle is something that's contaminated, or it could be that it's a blank parcel that has nothing there, like a farm field without any type of roads or water or sewer lines. Private industry is not going to pay for all of those lines to be run. That's not their role, right? So government steps in with this tool that's allowed us to overcome whatever hurdle it is that private industry won't tackle that will make the private development happen, okay? That's what the whole purpose of TIF is, and it's called the but-for test. But for the city coming in with their redevelopment commission TIF dollars, that development wouldn't be there. So we can talk all day about that assessed value and it's not going to schools and it's being captured for 25 years. But the question is, you would never have had it there, but for government stepping in and getting the sewer lines there, the water lines there. And it's a 25-year investment that is paid off over time, and then the TIF area goes away. And then you get that assessed value into your tax base, and that raises that AV number on the clipboard where we get that new AV, and our rate goes down. Everybody gets to pay less. But that's a long-term investment for 25 years. Okay, so overcoming the hurdle, overcoming the hurdle. All right, basically government's coming in to overcome the hurdle, but how do we do that? We do it, we have to have cash to overcome the hurdle. So the cash that we use is when we issue our bonds. And that cash is then used to pay for the water, sewer lines, the infrastructure that make development of that site possible. A TIF area can exist for 25 years after bonds are issued. So once you issue bonds, then the clock starts ticking. Now, sometimes after a period of years, your TIF area is performing well, and you have more revenue in your TIF that you can generate by TIF than what's needed to pay for the bonds and some projects that you have on your list. We might call that excess, okay? It's only if it's performing well, and that's not going to happen for a while until that TIF gets up and running for a few years, and you actually have property to assess and generate. And in that case, then you have some decisions to make about what to do. Do you want to do additional projects? Do you want to help other taxing units with their projects that harmonize with the whole goal of what you're trying to accomplish? Do you want to pass through assessed value? I didn't say pass through dollars. I said assessed value, which is a number on paper. It's not dollars. And this is my example here in a little bit. So if you're in this good, fortunate time where you are generating more than you need to pay off your bonds, and you've got in your TIF plan, in your, let's say your 5-year project plan, you've got everything pretty well covered, then you're in the situation where you might be able to think about some of these, whether you want to do additional projects, you want to help other taxing units, or you want to pass through assessed value.
Well, I know Thursday night we did exactly that.
That's where we're at.
Okay, well, you have one that's performing pretty well? But
No, we elected not to.
We were,
Not
our
to pass
bonds
it?
were being paid off, and we have other projects.
yeah. Each year, the Redevelopment Commission has to kind of look at this and determine if they have more than 200% needed for your bonds, and then also any project that you have on your list. Remember, that project list can keep growing too. And so if you do feel like you have more than enough to carry out your project list, which, that doesn't have to be your initial project list. That project list can change from year to year. All right, we feel like we have enough. Then it gives the Redevelopment Commission the option, or you're supposed to pass through if you have that much. Okay, so the pass through was something that we were struggling with in my county and what that really meant. And my examples are to show you how that works. So I got to go back to this formula again. AV times tax rate equals levy, because that's kind of how it all starts. Okay, so don't forget, levy is the amount of real dollars that we spend to operate government. Okay, so let's say this is our TIF, prior to our TIF area being created. We have a parcel that, in this example, has a farm. And for that parcel, the current assessed value, which is not real dollars, but it's the value of the property, $200,000. It's a value expressed in a dollar amount. So we're going to say $200,000 is what the assessor has said the value of this property is. For purposes of this example, we need $10 million to operate government. So we're trying to levy $10 million across all of our government here. For this parcel, with the $2 tax rate that's in place, that parcel is going to generate $4,000 to help us, build up to that $10 million that we're trying to get. Now we created a TIF area. That's the line. That's when we did our declaratory resolution, and that's our mark date. Okay? Now what? Well, then we're going to consider this our base. That's our tax base. Nothing changes about that. That $200,000 and the money it generated is still going to go to run government, okay? We issue bonds. The Redevelopment Commission issues bonds. We get that cash infusion, which allows us to put in broadband, sewer lines, water tower. That now makes this, that's overcoming the hurdle, now makes this parcel someplace that a private investor would want to locate. Or can locate. We've overcome the hurdle with that cash infusion and infrastructure. And let's say that some buildings build there. My example are these two little buildings, these industrial buildings in this company. Now, we assess those companies, and they have a value of $600,000. And that's considered our incremental assessed value. And that money is captured. So above the line, for those properties, it's captured. But see, our barn, it's still in the base. But for our new companies that are built, that new construction that came there but for us, the cash infusion, that is captured. And that AV of $600,000 is what we call the incremental capture. We take that times our tax rate, which is in this example is $2, just like it was down below. That will give us $12,000. And that money goes into our red bucket, which is our TIF bucket, okay? Because we're capturing that. Now, in our red bucket, that's going to go to pay off the bonds. But we'll get that every year. We'll get $12,000 every year, and it'll go to pay off the bonds, okay? Because we still have to pay those off for sure. Okay, now let's look at what happens if we have enough that we would want to pass through, okay? So let's say we have enough in the red bucket to pay off our bonds, and we have enough to do the other projects on our list. And now we're thinking about letting some AV, some value, pass down to the base, okay? Some of our captured AV go down to the base, okay? Let's say we do, that's my funnel, how do you like that? Let's say we do half of that AV that was captured, and we're gonna let that go down to the base. So I'm gonna take $300,000 of AV, so that's gonna make my base assessed value now $500,000, and it'll make my captured AV $300,000. Okay? What does that do to our tax rate? Well, now we calculate our tax rate down here. We still need to generate $10 million to run government. And we still need to get that $4,000. But now we have more assessed value, so everybody gets to pay less. Now their tax rate is 80 cents instead of $2. Okay? Everybody gets to pay less. So that helps everyone, keeps you down under the caps too when you can pass through AV. But what does it do on to the top part of the equation? We apply that 80-cent tax rate now up top. And we generate $2,400 of TIF for our red bucket instead of $12,000. It gives us less up there into our TIF bucket, right? So now my question is, how much are the people below down here helped versus how much are you losing up there? And can you help people more by spending out of your red bucket than to move it down here? That was our whole question in my county, right? I'm going to show you. Are you following me so far?
That's really a good way to.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so what can you do with the money in the red bucket? Right? What can you do with that money? Well, you got to pay your principal and interest on your bonds. And you can use it in any item that you determine in your TIF plan, that you've determined projects that are in, under your TIF plan. You can do it for other infrastructure projects that are needed. You can do acquisition of property. You can use it for projects to alleviate growing pains, like you might need new traffic lights, or now there's more traffic or more residential, you've spurred more growth. So now there's a new road that needs to be built. You can use it for other taxing districts, like to help schools. You can help schools through training programs, like if it goes along with what you're trying to accomplish in your TIF area, it could be used for some type of training program to help workers become educated to work at that company that you just built, or it could be that school needs a capital project. In my situation at home, the school needed this access road to get the school pickup all the people line up for school pickup, and they were out on the
We
road.
did exactly that, so that the mothers didn't have to
Yes.
compete with the teenagers leaving in the high school, because the
Yeah.
primary school was,
You can use TIF dollars for that, because that's a capital project, and it's in serving or benefiting the area. It's, right, you just has to be either in the area or serving or benefiting the area. And it helps overall traffic flow of the area. I mean, think about all the ways that road, getting those cars off, helped, okay? And you don't need to question the school about, is this really a big priority for you? If they tell you it's a priority, just go with what they say. Because they're trying to balance their budgets out too, right? They're trying to free up dollars. If they could spend something on capital here, it might give them money under their other property tax money to hire a teacher. Like you are making them, let them make those choices. Let them tell you. That was my point to our county, is like, you don't need to question it. Just, they know how to, they're trying to juggle their things too. And like I said, training programs. So, now the question is, would it be better off to pass through AV, or would it be better to let that money go, that $12,000 go to the red TIF bucket and try to do these projects that would really help the other taxing units more than if they got the pass through of AV? I think you're going to find it doesn't get them any new money when you pass through AV. Right? Our levies are limited. We can just raise $10 million. That's all we can. The schools are already capped. They can only raise a set amount. You're not giving them any new money when you pass through AV to work with, or any taxing unit. Okay, so strategize. I told our folks back home, if you're using property tax dollars to buy sheriff's cars, why don't you use TIF money to pay for sheriff's cars and use those property tax dollars to hire more people? Because what they're telling me is we can't hire the people, we don't have the operations money. Okay, you have local income tax money. What are you using that for that you can replace with a capital project out of TIF money to free up dollars that are more flexible that you could use for people and salaries? You got to think about how you can do these swaps.
Wanda, in
Yep.
terms of something like cars, where do you find that in the statute? What phraseology do you think covers something like that?
In serving and benefiting the area, that we have fire trucks that, like for instance, Amazon is built, and now the nearest township fire department is too far away, and they need fire suppression, which helps their insurance for that company. You can build a whole new fire station that's closer to them because they need it, and you could buy a fire truck, and that's done all the time because that helps that area, right? I mean, you're going to have new need for police officers. You can't buy the officer, but you could buy the capital project. You could buy the car, or a new police station.
Working on a new police station.
Yeah.
So you're saying we could
Mm-hmm.
help, that red bucket could help that new police station?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Will we have to mention either the comprehensive plan or the TIF plan would have public safety? Does it have to, we have to specifically say public safety to do something like that? We're talking about.
Well, I don't know. I
those
haven't
examples.
I haven't looked at your TIF plan.
The old plan talks about public safety, it doesn't specifically talk about.
But does that station have to be in a TIF district, or if it just will serve?
Just, what's it?
No, just.
Only has to serve it.
Serve it, okay, well,
Only has
yes.
to serve it. And then we could actually get bonds to help with that operational service?
Yeah.
I do have, actually, I'll post this now, but we can answer it at the end. So you mentioned, because in Hancock County, I'm assuming it's the county's redevelopment.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way for let's say, a county redevelopment commission and a city redevelopment commission to work together?
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming if it's a project that feeds both the rent. So they would have more money, they could put up something, but if it helps out, we put a little bit more money, everyone works together, but we all get the benefit out of that. Is that
Yeah.
something that?
Yeah, I always
can
say
happen?
that if you want to do something, there's a way to do it. Through interlocal agreement. Like, the statute is the way it is, but you just go and negotiate, for example, annexation is like a hot topic. Like, a lot of counties don't like when the city annexes into the county property because they lose in the short term in the income tax formula. I'm like, so in the long run, you gain because you get a neighborhood or the county is not having to deal with water and sewer lines. A city or town is more suited for that. So if in the short term the county loses, just contract for that. Figure out a way that the city will pay the county for a number of years until they start seeing that revenue come back. You can make it happen. It's interlocal agreement. Just, you can, when there's a will, there's a way. You just work it out between, okay, you're gonna lose here, so I need to let you have this, and you can work it out locally. They give us great flexibility to have interlocal agreements. Yeah. And a lot of times it's just hard to think out of the box because you think the statute says this and this is the way I have to do it, which is true, but then you do have to follow those guidelines, but you can also contract.
But there's always some communities like here, there's always that identity thing. This is us, this is ours, we need
Yeah.
to own.
Or then who's gonna maintain it is really like a question, right? All of that's can be worked out. Yeah. Right now we're trying to figure out how to build a animal shelter where all the cities within the county and the county works together. I mean, it's one of those things we're just gonna have to, there's not anything in the Indiana code for how you do that. So we're all just gonna have to.
Animal control is gonna serve, this purpose of it's gonna serve the community outside and inside. And
Yeah,
everywhere, and
yeah,
it's gonna
yeah.
benefit everybody.
Yeah. Or another example would be like your 911 answering center, You all have to figure out a formula that works and go back and revisit it we'll have a contract, go back and revisit it. Because things change and dynamics change and finances change, So my point is just to strategize. How can you help other units with actual cash from the TIF bucket versus passing through AV, which doesn't get them any new working dollars? It could help you in your tax cap loss, because remember, the bigger AV number helps you. And I got an example of that, so let me show you this one. All right, this example is from Plainfield. Plainfield has over 40 million square feet of industrial space. This is over by the airport where they've done a lot of this warehousing and things like that.
That's on, like Ronald Reagan Parkway?
Yep. So Plainfield used TIF and EDIT money, Economic Development Income Tax, to leverage over $1 billion of private investment. So they overcame the hurdle to get the people there, and now private investment to the tune of $1 billion. And to fund $500 million worth of infrastructure. So by funding the $500 million of infrastructure to get the lines there, allowed private investment to come in and invest at the tune of $1 billion. Okay. All right. So now, a few years ago, it's a little bit old, but they decided in Plainfield to pass through $100 million of AV. So remember the funnel? They did 100 million. My example was 300,000. This is 100 million, okay? All right, so what did that look like? At the end of the day, all the taxing units overlapping with Plainfield, which would be the township, the town fire territory, the school, and the library, by passing through that AV, they got an additional $728,000 to work with by passing through that AV. However, the TIF lost $2.7 million. Would you rather have $728,000 or would you rather have 2.7 million. Now granted, the 728 are more flexible spending dollars, but how can you use the 2.7 to be creative and to pay for projects that these taxing units need, that are capital in nature, that would allow them to free up operating dollars?
Was it to bring the property tax down? Is that was that?
Yeah, they got their rate to come down.
But that's what the public wanted? Was that something that they wanted to get the tax rate down?
Well, the schools are always saying, pass through AV, they think it's gonna give them more money, but it really doesn't. It really doesn't. Their levies are set. That's a max amount the DLGF tells them they can only raise. So passing through AV helped the school with $226,000. Although the superintendent told me, I saw him at a hearing, and I said, wow, you got like $300,000. He says, no, the DLGF cut us back because that would have been a windfall for us. Because, you know, their levy, like, they can only go so high with their they can only levy some.
If they kept that in the red bucket,
If they would've kept it in the red-
incrementally, they could use those TIF dollars to have given them incrementally.
They could have
Or we
given,
could help them do projects at the school.
you can help them do projects.
Even if it's not in a TIF, controlled by
Yeah.
RDC,
Yeah.
because it's services.
Yeah. In Lebanon High School, they built a whole conference center using TIF dollars onto the high school. And now the community uses that conference center and the school can use it for training or for whatever. They
So
built a
like
whole,
lights at the baseball field and the softball field that is now out of the budget.
probably.
With our
Because that's what, trying to create a quality place to do, and that is what brings in companies.
Because like the schools, like the two fields, they're also gonna use them throughout the summer to generate revenue for the schools by renting them out to travel teams that have tournaments, which would be incredibly helped with lights, because right now, we've
Yeah.
had 2 ball games in the tie because they don't have any lights. That's not a huge deal in general. However, when you have these tournaments, like a friend of mine, the last game he plays tonight is at 9 o'clock. And if you can add another 4 games.
Grand
in a
Park was built
weekend,
with TIF dollars. You know?
But you only do it the one time and not maintain it.
Yeah, we don't maintain, we just
Yeah,
buy.
that is kind of the ongoing, there's been a case that says, like, Centennial Park up in Munster, you're a Lake County guy, okay, are you familiar with that?
I am.
They took an old, what do we call it, landfill,
Yeah.
and
Yes,
they,
actually, yes, I am.
And they-
That's why it's so big.
Yeah.
It's so huge. It's an old
Yeah.
landfill.
and they redeveloped it, and it's a golf course and a community center now and everything. And there was a case that said, State Board of Accounts versus the Munster Redevelopment Commission, where you can't, like, use it to pay for mowing the grass or keeping the golf, you know, it's not for maintenance, it's for capital projects, and so
Well, we
that,
could help with a project, I mean, we could buy lights or something similar to that.
think about what people run around, they want to live somewhere quality, they wanna have things to do, they wanna have movies, and they wanna have concerts, and,
Our greenway, we're in the greenway right now, so we've got a trail, the walk trail. So we've been instrumental in helping with that walk trail.
Yeah, so as I see this, essentially, you know, the tip helps and not passing through the AV helps because we can take on the capital projects, which will then free up their budget to do pay operations and personnel, essentially, at least for a certain period of time until the mission is accomplished, I guess, or what have you.
right, like, it might be better for them if, when I say them, I'm gonna say like the schools, because they're the ones that usually complain that you're not passing through.
Yes.
And when you say, well, if we pass through, you're not gonna get anything, you know? First of all, you can't do that with every TIF, only a healthy one, because the new ones, you're trying to get it up and going, you've got bonds, it's gonna take a while. But when they are healthy and you have extra money where you can help them with projects that are all in the tune of what you're trying to accomplish for that area, that helps that company somehow, or it helps that area, or helps,
Or just public quality of life.
because that's how do you get people to want to locate in your community, it's when you have good schools, because they want their workers being somewhere where there's good schools, it's safe. Anything you do public safety, making your whole towns and cities safe is serving the area, right? Lighting, everything, that serves the area. It helps make your community a better place to be.
In the town of Munster case, for some reason, the Court of Appeals didn't really get any facts. They just said that they were spending money to maintain.
You kind of have to take that one with a grain of salt, because that is a case with a particular set of facts. And we can try to learn from that set of facts to say, are my set of facts like that one? But no one is going to have the exact set of facts that that case had. But you can kind of say, now as an attorney, because that's your job, is to protect these folks from spending money that they might have to pay back. Or so you would have to look at that case and say, I think this is too much like the Munster case, that we should probably try to steer clear of that. You
I
know?
wish Munster would have said what they were actually doing. They really did.
I don't know. I think they were like mowing the grass and stuff. I
It
don't know.
didn't say any of that in the Court of Appeals decision. Now,
Yeah.
Maybe in the trial court decision, which is not
But we
published.
used
Yeah.
to help with that exact same, we used to help with that in some of our areas. There was a boardman that would take
It's
care
given
of
to the
properties
parties,
and
and
mowing
that's it.
grass, and we're paying
We
for
could
that,
probably-
but we
you
stopped
might be able
doing
to
that for
find
that
it.
same
The
reason,
clerk's office.
because it was maintenance. The boardman, we got in trouble for paying for assistance.
Yeah.
with-
State Board of Accounts could call you on that. So,
Okay.
you know.
We
But-
want to avoid that if we can.
You asked me about the tax rate on this Plainfield situation. So the tax rate actually got to go down to, okay, let's say that you didn't use TIF dollars to do what they did to get that same project going, and you put it on a property tax bond. If you did that, you'd have to have a 2.73 tax rate, but they did it with TIF, and their tax rate was $2.09. So that just shows you trying to get to the same end goal without using TIF is going to be more of a burden on the taxpayers at a higher tax rate and larger cap loss. Okay, so I just wanted to show you some examples, I guess, of comprehensive plans. Let me just show you, get my mouse here. I'm going to go out of this and I'm going to go to how you make this all happen, because Bob asked me to talk about where you start and how you get all this going. I'll give you some resources. Let me start with this while it's on my slide, and then I'll come back to this. If any of you have some extra time, I would recommend this. It's called the American Citizen Planner. They just started it. I think they're on their third course of people. I was in the second group of people to do this course. It's all online, and you work at your own pace, and there are, I think, 28 units. It's through Purdue University, and it's American Citizen Planner 101 and 201, I believe. And I enjoyed it so much. And if you guys like this area, this was really helpful. And then because it was COVID, we did our little group meetings through Zoom, and we did, I think we did two or four of those. But it just walks you through like open door law and well, let me just.
Is there a charge for that?
Yeah, but it's not very much. It's like $200. So if this, I think you would enjoy it. I did. And then let's see. Well, you can't see this, but it starts out with like, what does the Plan Commission do? What does the open door law? It goes to some of this information about comprehensive plans and kind of gives you an overview. Now this, if you go to American Planning Association, Indiana chapter, you can get to this booklet, which the American Citizens Planner course uses some materials out of this book, but I think you can do this right now. I mean, it's all online. this was chapter 7, but they have lots of chapters. I can actually, I don't even know if I'm probably not connected to the internet here, but I would recommend that course through Purdue if you really want to get involved. Now, let me go to just a couple of resources. Okay, I'll give you a, what do I do with my glasses?
This PowerPoint presentation, is it available?
I can send it to you.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so, let's see. I don't know if this will show up. Okay, so here's an example of Noblesville's comprehensive plan. I have several samples of comprehensive plans if you would like to look at that. I'll just kind of scroll through to show you how in-depth it is. I mean, so we got land use. Like an intro. This is, you know, a private consultant has helped with this, obviously.
What does it cost to put something like that together in one place, or I really know what to tell them? Special thing?
Oh, golly. I think we,
Do you have a recommendation for a consultant?
well, our county just did HWC, Vanderwally, and Structure Point were 3 that came to our county and submitted proposals. I think I want to say, let me ask, I'll ask how much it was. Okay. And then the other thing you can do is, like, here's Noblesville. Whoops, that's, looks like the same thing I had. Maybe I copied the wrong one. But my point is that you can do the comprehensive plan, but then you can have these types of plans for like a corridor. Like you might have a capital improvement infrastructure or a corridor plan, or in Noblesville I found one that was just for a sub area for their downtown. So you can just keep, you know, it can be the comprehensive plan, but then you can go in and have one of these companies do like in-depth planning for a certain, you know, smaller area. Like you really, like especially a downtown where there's businesses and things like that. We'll come in and look at the demographics just of that and your road structure, your infrastructure lines, what's there, your water and sewer. I mean, you can have these types of plans done for like a thoroughfare. One that we're going to be highlighting through RAI was City of Franklin, and I drove through that the other day. We went there to eat the other night, and they were able to, the Redevelopment Commission was able to buy a property, sell it to someone who said they would develop it into commercial property. They invested like a ton of their own money, but it was not until the RDC stepped in and, you know, made it possible for them to locate there. They got private dollars, and now all of those commercial buildings along that corridor, like there's fast foods, there's little businesses, they're all thriving because that whole corridor was improved. But it was the RDC money that kind of spurred all of that. Now, let me show you this point on RFP. Let's see. I don't know. It's going to take you to our website. We've got a couple of RFPs.
I'd like to note it is 11:35,
Yep.
so we have about 25 minutes left.
Okay. Let me just say, instead of pulling these up, I can send you links to all these. But instead of you just sitting here waiting for a company to come in and tell you what they'll bring, be proactive and put out an RFP saying what you want. We've got a couple projects where you've got a certain area, you want a developer to come in and you tell them what kind of design you want, what kind of facade you want, what kind of materials you want. You want it to be brick, you want it to be in tune with whatever else is there. You are proactively putting out a request for proposals back to you to develop a certain area. Your TIF incentives can be used also to get the kind of businesses, the kind of developers that you want. You can use TIF monies for land purchases, for buying property for a low dollar amount and then selling it to a developer for a very low cost in exchange for them to redevelop it and make it better and kind of spur the growth. But I would do what Bob said. He mentioned clawbacks. Anytime you give incentives, you put in those agreements that if they don't do what you told them to do or what the agreement was, that you're clawing that back, you're going to ask for that money back. Or you're going to say, you're not going to get the incentive that we said we were going to give you. Kind of like tax abatement, where they have to come in and show that they met their pledge. Consider having a 5-year project spending plan. That just helps everybody get on the same page. Communication is key. And then open up an application process for your other taxing units. Like, tell the schools, I have a sample application from the city of Greendale. Tell them what you're doing. We have this TIF area. We're trying to spur this kind of growth. Then let the schools apply to you for TIF money for something they think will help the overall vision for that area. Put applications out there. Or it could be the library. They're like, hey, guess what? If you would give us TIF money for some study rooms, we can enhance and let that company come here and do their training in our library. Or, you know what I mean? Like, let them think about it, how they might be able to get a project going that benefits their unit of government with TIF dollars that would harmonize with what you're trying to accomplish. And that's all with communication. I've got applications where sample I can give you, open it up to the schools, let them tell you what they need, and open it up to, maybe it is lights, and maybe it's quality of life. We're trying to create quality of place. That's what's attracting business these days.
So do you suggest anytime there's the use of TIF money for projects, you recommend an application process for all of those projects, or are you just sort of giving the application?
I'm just giving that as something you could do. I think that spurs communication, because then it lets you know that you're open to it, that you're open to the ideas, and let's hear what your ideas are,
Would you use a separate type of application for commercial or industrial application? Because it'd be a different kind of ask.
So that's an interesting thought. With the applications, I was kind of referring to putting word out to your other taxing units, like your schools, your cities, towns. You can have applications for businesses too, like maybe existing businesses, because you're not only trying to attract, you're trying to keep, and you're trying to grow, because these are the good people that have stuck with you, right? And you do. So that's not a bad idea. But I would say, if you're going to ask for a large application fee, or I would maybe say be careful about that, because
Well, I don't think we were thinking of fee, but more what do you intend to do?
I don't know, I think we're so small that
A
it's
description of
the same.
need, and a little bit more about the partnership.
Keeping it kind of form simple would
Yeah.
be the way to go. It's not,
Well, I don't think it's a bad idea, because I'm a person who like to have everything in writing. You tell me something, I'm not going to remember it, and I can take notes, but they're notes.
Well, a description of need and something that kind of is in the
It
purpose.
doesn't need to be complex, but just so there's.
you know what?
I have to show that.
No, I appreciate it.
I think that,
Thank you so much.
yeah, I think that allows the communication process to start, because then you have, this person has an idea, this local business has an idea. Let's bring them in. Now we'll call them and we'll say, come into the next redevelopment commission, let's hear about it. We'd like to hear your idea for this. And then they're gonna invest their private dollars too, and maybe other businesses along that corridor will as well, but unless you open the door up for that type of communication, you wouldn't know about it otherwise. So application process is kind of a way to get that to start.
That's kind of the direction we want the outdoor seating. It's, draw some picture of what you want. I mean, it's basically the same.
And how we're gonna partner with those dollars, not
Yes.
just us all in, but that partnership purpose.
Are you doing an amphitheater or something, or?
Right now, we're just doing some outdoor seating for the restaurants that
Oh, yeah,
generate those.
Right.
I talked to you about amphitheater stuff.
Yeah.
You and I talked
Yeah.
about it.
yeah.
And I just found out another city's getting ready to build one. I don't know if it's through RDC or not.
Greenfield is,
Greenfield, Martinsville.
yeah.
I called Greenfield months ago when I talked to you, and the
Yeah.
girl goes, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Oh, no.
We've been doing a lot of work,
Is
the
it-
new Amazon warehouse.
Yeah,
That's,
Is it through the RDC in Greenfield?
I would think so, yeah. Joni Fitzwater is the person to talk to
Okay,
there.
well, 'cause
Probably just
I
maybe
wanna
didn't
start
get to the right,
visiting some of these.
yeah. They haven't started they've got
No.
it, they got it kind of like, walled off there, but they
The
don't,
most recent I heard about was Martinsville's talking about it, and I saw the plans for Logansport. It is fabulous.
really? Logansport, cool.
Yes, it's really cool.
I love all this. I think it's just great. I like being able to have your community be somewhere that I love coming down your street. I hadn't been down here in a while. My aunt used to live in Beech Grove. And just to see the little shops, it has such a great feel. Yeah. So it's good work.
You can't do it for noon, unfortunately, but never eat next door in Applebee's.
Where I want to go is the antique store.
Rustic or-
Yeah. I'm like, oh, I'm stopping there.
She's done such a great job
Yeah.
marketing